Honorable Madam Vice President, honorable ministers, members of Parliament, excellencies, esteemed representatives of the religious communities in Bulgaria, esteemed representatives of the judiciary, esteemed representatives of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to sincerely thank you for being here and to welcome you to the international conference entitled Stop Hate Speech. This event gathered together representatives of various religious communities, Orthodox Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Jews. We all here in this room are united by the protection of human rights and freedoms. Today, high-level magistrates from many countries, representatives of various religious communities, politicians, historians, public figures, representatives of the academia, civil activists, journalists will be trying to find ways through legal means enhance prevention against hate crimes before they become something of our everyday life. This is something of concern to all of us who are working towards building a more fair and friendly way. The organizers of this conference is the Prosecutor's Office of the Republic of Bulgaria and the European Jewish Association. The host of the conference on human rights and respect of religious, gender and ethnic belonging is the Prosecutor General of the Republic of Bulgaria, Mr. Ivan Geshev. I wish success to this conference and our mission. I'd like to hand over to Prosecutor General of the Republic of Bulgaria, Mr. Ivan Geshev. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, and like-minded supporters, I'm honored to open the conference entitled Stop Hate Speech, co-organized by the Prosecutor's Office of the Republic of Bulgaria and the European Jewish Association. I'm proud that Bulgaria set the beginning of an European initiative to fight hate speech. Recently, we've been witnessing an upsurge of anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and racism. There is a permanent trend to strengthen discrimination based on gender, gender orientation, minority groups, and other anti-democratic trends that hate speech can bring about. Recently, especially after the Russian aggression in Ukraine, it seems that we do not learn from the lessons we learn from what we take in history. And in order to do this, we should be very vigilant not to repeat the atrocities of the Holocaust, where 6 million people died, and other forms of genocide and killings of people. Because the truth is that words come before acts, and the Holocaust and all other atrocities in human history started with something that we may think innocent, like hate speech against one person. But this is only the beginning, and if you let me quote the Bulgarian hero Vasilevsky, we need to act. We don't need words. We need to start more actively do good things, like keep the memory about the good and build a monument in the city of Sofia dedicated to the lawyers who were involved in the rescue of the Bulgarian Jews. And also, as this conference, that is why this conference is so important for me. It is important so we can actively start working and coordinate efforts against the anti-democratic trends that I mentioned. Well, I began by saying that I'm proud. I'm proud because Bulgaria has demonstrated and is still demonstrating that it's a positive model of tolerance and respect between people. It is important to know that today we have here representatives of 4 main religions in Bulgaria: Orthodox Christians, Catholics, Jews, and Muslims. We have with us the prosecutors general from all over Europe, politicians, NGOs defending human rights, representatives of the academia, and many friends from different countries, including from the State of Israel. Only a few meters away from here, for decades, we have had the peaceful coexistence of a mosque, a synagogue, an Orthodox and a Catholic church. We have been living together and will continue in this way and give a positive example. It's easy to be bad, but it's hard to be good, to be a human in inhuman times like the Second World War, where the Bulgarian nation, the Orthodox Church, representatives of the Bulgarian government saved all their Jewish compatriots, despite the fact that Bulgaria was an ally of Nazi Germany. No Bulgarian Jew was sent to the death camps. And later, many of them laid the foundations of the State of Israel, thanks to people like Dmitry Peshev, Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, who ardently protected, together with another 43 members of Parliament, Bulgarian Jews, like the Metropolitan Bishop Cyril, who said that he would lie on the railway to stop the train. And like the clergyman who received delegations and he served in church for the protection of the Jews. Like many professional organizations, writers, journalists who demonstrated in defense of their fellow citizens, the Jews. And we shouldn't be afraid, because if we, being allies of Nazi Germany, if we could do it, this means that other Europeans could have done even more. I'm not only proud, but also sad, because the Bulgarian state back then did not manage to save over 11,000 Jews from Thracia and Macedonia. They were killed in Treblinka, Katowice, and Auschwitz. And Bulgaria learned about this only when they saw the trains with those martyrs. We are indeed very sad that we did not manage to save them. But still, we have to be proud of the fact that we saved those Jews who lived here they lived within the boundaries of the Kingdom of Bulgaria. And the memory of those who died from Macedonia and Thracia, the dignity should be preserved and not used for political purposes. We should show the good example and try to be good in order to give our contribution to the modern life. Let's remember that at the beginning we had the word, and evil begins with hate speech. We should learn from history, and we should always try to be tolerant and democratic. And I'm sure that together we can do it, because here we are all united by one thing, our desire to build a better society, and one goal, to have this in the minds of all Europeans. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Geshev. I'm confident that we here will find answers to the very important questions that will be asked today. And now I'd like to give the floor to Rabbi Menachem, Margolin, who is the president of the European Jewish Association.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be with you here today. I would like to thank the Prosecutor General, Ivan Geshev, for organizing this very important conference. Mr. Geshev, you were with us just a month ago in Auschwitz. And you understand very well what is at stake when we talk about anti-Semitism and where hate speech can lead to. The train tracks that lead to the gas chambers, there are the final stop of hate. And the fact that you had the commitment to organize this very important gathering with so many dignitaries and experts, the fact that you care so much for the future of the Jewish people and seek to help in meaningful and constructive ways is deeply, deeply appreciated by the European Jewish Association and by the hundreds of Jewish communities that we represent across Europe. I would like also to thank our dear friend Yaakov Gerasi for his deep involvement and contribution. And of course, Bettina Yotova, thank you so much for your patience and professionalism. Friends, today and tomorrow, we will hear from many experts ideas and ways how to stop hate speech. And of course, I wish all of us to find an answer to it. But before the experts, I want to speak with you in simple, very simple language. About a month ago, when we were in Auschwitz, I shared with the participants that just several days earlier, my two young sons were coming home from school shocked and upset because on the bus, a lady, upon seeing them, hissed, "Dirty Jews." My friends, all the theories, all the academic researches, all of the analysis, reporting, and statistics are at no use at all to me, as a father, that need to explain my two sons why it happened to them. And here is the thing, my friends. Hate speech and anti-Semitism does not exist in the place of logic. But more important, it doesn't exist in happy minds. Instead, it lives and it grows in the mind of people who are unhappy with themselves. In the place in the world, they are not happy with their place in the world, and therefore they seek to blame others for the situation in which they find themselves. It lives in those who do not like the company of others who are not like them, who see threats in difference. People who hate Jews, first of all, are unhappy with themselves. It's easy to hate Jews because it's a target, that some politicians and anti-Semites create as so-called united enemy. But if those people who hate themselves, if they do not have Jews around them to hate, they will find other people to hate. They will hate blacks, they will hate Christians, they will hate Muslims, they will hate gays, they will hate lesbians, they will hate police, they will hate Georgians, they will hate rich people, they will hate someone. And therefore, hate against Jews is not hate against Jews. It's people who have their hate inside themselves, which must be stopped. Because it is not a threat for the Jewish people. This is a threat for the united Europe. It is a threat for the world. Now, for sure, to untangle these notes of hatred is hard work. But I do not think it is impossible. Or else, I wouldn't be here today. So why am I here? I'm here to share with you something that the first leader of the Jewish people, Moses, he shared with the Jews thousands of years ago. It was before they entered the Promised Land and after 40 years of wandering in the desert. And they were struggling. They were struggling with the difficult task set to them. To always do the right thing, but not only that, to always be also a light unto the nations. How could they possibly do all the tasks that God has given them? And Moses answered them something very simple, which I would like to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, today. I would skip the Hebrew original text and I'll get straight to the translation. And he said, my dear Jews, it is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us? And he continued, and it is not behind the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us? No, he said, it is very close to you. It is in your mouth and it is in your heart to observe it. Those simple words are the most profound and meaningful that I know. Because the way to counter ignorance and hate speech is to live, all of us, completely different than those that spread it. We should be an example. An example. We should be proud of difference and diversity, and we should welcome it. We should welcome the differences with open arms. And above all, to ensure, and Mr. Geshev, this will be your responsibility and all your colleagues here in Europe, to ensure by using all and every means, education, legislations, and more, that hatred of the self can never, ever be expressed against another human being. What did I tell my sons? The same that I'll be sharing with you guys today. I told my sons, be proud of who you are. Be proud of what you believe in. Be proud in what sustains you, of what you stand for, and to defeat it. It is not out of reach. It is not impossible to defeat. It is in all of us if we dig deep. Dear friends, you are all here today because you all have it in yourselves. I have no doubt that you all believe that hate should not and cannot win I wish you all a much success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Margolin. And now I'd like to hand over to Madam Iliana Yotova, Vice President of the Republic of Bulgaria. Mr. Geshev, Prosecutor General of the Republic of Bulgaria, esteemed Rabbi Margolin, ministers, representatives of religious communities in Bulgaria, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to be part of this two-day conference, Stop Hate Speech. Crises that are seeking but not finding solutions, generating fear because of rumors about conspiracies and dangers, instead of debates with the political oppositions, using coercion, pressure, using the power of the government against them. Non-tolerance of criticism. If you criticize, you're an enemy. Lack of will to participate in a meaningful discussion. Pushing the intelligentsia out. You are dear to us, but you better write your books, paint your paintings. Otherwise, we'll be wasting time talking to you, condemning the different instead of helping them and including them, because they are the rest. Leaders, saviors who know the solutions, who speak on behalf of the people. They flirt with their people, and it's not their people, because of national interest, xenophobic rhetoric, insulting qualifications, lies, and hate are part of the political language that is conquering new territories. The leader who claimed to be a charismatic person who speaks in simple sentences in order not to provoke a discussion, because this is how the people would understand him. He does not tolerate opposition and objections, and he points at the guilty ones. No meaningful discussions. So what am I talking about, ladies and gentlemen? Germany and pre-war Europe of the 30s of the last century? Or can we see some features of our modern societies in this? This, thanks God, ladies and gentlemen, this is the warning of fascism, the 14 characteristics left by us by Umberto Eco, who urged us to point a finger at every manifestation of those features, every of those that I listed, every day in every part of the world. Have we learned to do this? Can we recognize the facts, the personalities? Each one of us here can answer this question. The Holocaust, colleagues, did not start with the gas chambers, but with the speech of hate against a minority of people. Today, four of 5 people of Jewish origin are convinced that anti-Semitism is a serious issue, and they believe that the trends are deepening. And 44% of those young people have already encountered ethnic-based violence. The Nazi regime in Bulgaria adopted legislation to crush independent media and to replace with these media with other media spreading hate speech, disinformation and lies. Der Stürmer, one of the most evil newspaper had an evil role that worked towards the suspension of human freedoms. Cruelties were tolerated as normal behavior, and this led to the Holocaust, whereby over 6 million people died. Today, hate speech can reach far. It denies that the Holocaust ever existed. The anti-Semitic virus can mutate in any social and public crisis, and this infects our societies, more and more people, and their toolkits are more diverse. And this is a threat to not only to the minorities, it's a threat to our democracy. And that's why our conversation today is so topical and so much more important than the conversations about fuel and energy supplies. Europe and the world is now going through a very difficult period of crisis that have something in common, and this is the lack of working solutions. From the perspective of society, this creates lack of confidence, lack of security, polarization, and mistrust, lack of rights, loss of rights, and also the stigmatization of groups of people, denial of justice, and not complying with the old Roman rule, innocent until proven guilty. The wrong assumption that we first have to deal with the financial crisis and only then can we think about rights. This provides room for the suspension of rights. In the 21st century, where we have rights in conventions and charters, we have to defend rights more than ever. From the perspective of politics, the lack of adequate solutions led to justification of the mistakes of the politicians. The politicians want to spread the misinformation that the more you deny, the more people would trust you. You remember the attitude of the UK against migrants. This was sometime before Brexit. Hate speech, and with other events like this, hate speech becomes a norm. On the opposite side, people who have strong arguments and good managers and governors, they don't use hate speech. They don't need aggressive language. It is very important that the political elite is credible. Very often, facts are distorted, claims are made without evidence. By the way, this last claim that you can cross the Bulgarian border for 50 euros is an example of this. And now the media is a very sensitive topic. They are a conduit of hate speech, or they are using hostile language themselves. On the other hand, where's the border, the line between freedom of speech and the responsibility for what you're saying? Can the media evade this role in which the reality is that politicians use hate speech. And it's another matter when media are involved in slander campaigns against minority groups, vulnerable groups in the Bulgarian society. From the perspective of social media, it's a breeding ground for hate speech. Under the veil of anonymity, it's very easy to demonstrate non-acceptance, hatred, denial. By the way, the typical manifestation of those who are afraid to show who they are, and especially in close groups, everything is accepted as truth. How do we fight this? Well, undoubtedly, the legislative framework is of key importance. I'd like to commend the organizers of this conference that they have dedicated a large part of the discussions on the legal framework. But is this the cure to this epidemic? Technical means can also prevent hate speech. At the European level, a series of documents have been adopted. I think back in 2010 there was the directive of the audiovisual services code of conduct and so on. But what is the trend? Well, initially, the hate speech was strictly followed on the social media, but now this is no longer the case. But the most important aspects are young people. Young people can be easily fall victims of radicalized policies. Hostile speech is only the first step to hate crimes and violence. Let us remember the year 2006, the killing of Ilhan in France. He was killed just because he was Jew. This was the first killing in after the Second World War. Then the killing of the 82-year-old lady just because she was Jewish. Ladies and gentlemen, 50 years ago, Bulgaria managed to rescue its Jewish population, and it's a cause to be pride, a reason to be pride, but also not only in the history of Bulgaria, but also in the world history, because this was done with the key support of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. And this is indicative of the tolerance that is here in our society. We have to keep this memory. I'm one of the biggest proponents of the fact to build here in Bulgaria a museum on the rescue of the Bulgarian Jews, and to honor all those righteous persons who are not only in the museums abroad, but also here in Bulgaria. Because one of the biggest dangers here is the rewriting and distortion of history, including distorting the fact and denying the fact that the Holocaust ever existed. So we need to find a way to go through this, to continue living to this hostile, in this hostile world. We have to be intolerant of this, and this will be much more important than any legal text. Well, how we will go on depends. This will determine whether the good will prevail over evil, whether truth will prevail over the lies. The war waged with words has to be won with words. Let's together find those words. Good luck to the conference.
Thank you, Madam Yotova. A welcoming speech on behalf of His Excellency the Bulgarian Patriarch and Sofia Metropolitan Neophyte. It will be pronounced by Polycarp, Vicar of the Sofia Metropolitan. Madam Yotova, esteemed Mr. Geshev, representatives of different religious communities, organizers of this wonderful forum, Your Excellencies, representatives of different political fractions in Bulgaria and abroad, God-loving fathers, sisters and brothers, allow me to express the satisfaction that the Bulgarian Orthodox Church was invited to this forum, and we hope that with God's will it will give fruit which would not only outline the problems but also provide solutions to the different conflicts and problems. Allow me to welcome you on behalf of the Bulgarian Metropolitan Neophyte to all of you, esteemed organizers and participants, dear guests. It is my pleasure to welcome the organization of conferences dedicated to topics of concern to the world as a whole and encompassing the speech of tolerance and mutual respect. The title of today's meeting is chosen because we have widespread anti-Semitism worldwide. The importance and delicacy of the topics concerned require an approach based on respect towards man as the wreath of God's creation, which would manage but also care the world. The Orthodox Church, believing in its values stemming from Jesus Christ, witnesses the truth that each person deep down is marked with the divine image. There is no doubt that the Orthodox Church feels empathy and wants for hate speech to be put an end to more than 30 years after the transition from totalitarian to a democracy of our fatherland Bulgaria. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church, the Bulgarian Church wants religion to be a part of the school curricula, where the learners are forming their attitudes about the world around them. It is then that the right approaches for the future populations will be built, the ability to talk in dialogue and to want peace. These are invaluable values at the foundation of humanity and mutual respect towards well-being among fellow humans. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church has, through its history, witnessed and proven that it completely rejects all forms of hate speech and the actions driven by xenophobic, discriminatory or anti-Semitic grounds. This was proven during the time that, together with the salvation of Bulgarian Jews, with the opinions on terminating the forced expulsion of Bulgarians who are Muslims. Now there is war between two brotherly nations, Christians. We are trying to support the innocent people who are believers, to support them from the horrors of the war. The Christian ethics does not make a distinction between heathens and Christians, believers, non-believers. That's why our love surpasses race and nationality. The love that the Church of Christ polarizes is above difference. For the Church, only man is important, humans, and in humans we have a deeply marked image of God. This is why organizing such forums is not only important but also essential for supporting every man. We are praying for peace and for blessing, and we wish you during the holidays that there is peace on earth and well-being among people. All the best. Neophyte, Bulgarian Patriarch. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And now I'd like to hand over to Mr. Krum Zarkov, Caretaker Minister of Justice of the Republic of Bulgaria. Madam Vice President, Prosecutor General, esteemed representatives of the religious communities, excellencies, friends, dear friends from the European Jewish Association, ladies and gentlemen, let me, on behalf of the Ministry of Justice, to welcome you here to this event and thank you for inviting me to be here. This is one more manifestation of the continuing efforts of the Bulgarian government to counter hate speech and hate crimes. Even back in 1991, the authors of the Bulgarian constitution proclaimed the principle of tolerance as the highest constitutional value. It is the core of all constitutional provisions. Later on, our constitution developed the ban on discrimination as a key factor building our democratic society. The penal code of the Bulgaria includes hate crimes in hate speech in Article 164 and the following articles. Very recently, the Council of Ministers submitted to the Parliament a draft law that increases the list of crimes that are incited by xenophobic reasons and racist reasons, and also by because of sexual orientation. In this way, we are trying to safeguard a protection of highest level. But as you all said, that legal provisions cannot be enough. Recently, ladies and gentlemen, looking at different television channels, reading the social media, I seem to recall more and more often a quote by Paul Valéry. He says that the war is an event where people who don't know each other destroy each other at the expense of people who know each other well but do not destroy each other. And I think the key word here is know each other. And I think there is no prejudice that can prevent different communities from knowing each other. And I hope that this event will contribute to this. I'd like to thank for the invitation. The Ministry of Justice will participate. We will have a report by the director of our directorate, who is in charge of human rights protection. And I'll be pleased to follow this conference, and I wish you good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Zarkov, for the strong words. And now I give the floor to Velislava Petrova, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs in the caretaker government. Madam Vice President, Mr. Prosecutor General, Minister, guests, it's a great pleasure for me to be here and to welcome the organizers for such ensuring so many visitors to an important conference on an important topic. It's important to have discussions on this topic. It's with deep concern that we see more and more frequent hate speech. At the same time, there are many examples in history in which hate speech turns into criminal offenses which escalate with time. If we don't turn attention to hate speech on time and in timely way, the Holocaust, which is the gravest hate crime, was preceded by decades of hate speech, which turned into discrimination and ended up with physical extermination of millions of people. Now, contemporary technology, which otherwise contribute to our well-being, create at the same time new opportunities for dissemination of hate speech. For example, in the survey of public attitudes towards anti-Semitism, 48% of all surveyed and 95% of the representatives of the Jewish community in Bulgaria say that social networks are the main place where they become victims of hate speech. The plethora of unverified information, uncritical thinking, populism, create additional conditions for dissemination of hate speech. This negative phenomenon further deepens divisions, this unfamiliarity that Minister Zarkov talked about, and they undermine the values of freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and human rights that democratic societies are built upon. This is why hate speech should be a priority for all of us, not only those in power, but every individual. For Bulgaria, hate speech is a cause which is deeply rooted in our history. The spirit, the values, and historical traditions of Bulgarian society provide a very good foundation on which institutions can counteract hate speech. Historically, Bulgarians and their representatives have on numerous occasions been the victims of hate crime. This is why institutions are especially sensitive to hate speech victims, and they prioritize the fight against this negative phenomenon, which is on the rise. Recently, a similar case in North Macedonia came to attention. For decades, there has been hate speech which turned into hate crime. This phenomenon that I talked about in the beginning, this could be avoided if there is timely action by the institutions, and this should be our goal, and this is our urge. Worldwide, Hate speech ranks high in the foreign political priorities of Bulgaria. Bulgaria is an active participant in all international fora on counteracting this negative phenomenon. We have a consistent policy and categorically denounce all forms of discrimination, hate speech and intolerance. We are convinced that this way we contribute towards a more fair society. In this context, Bulgaria pays attention to all contemporary forms of anti-Semitism. Bulgaria is one of the active countries counteracting anti-Semitism in international organizations and has such a position in the UN. We are an active member of the International Alliance for Memorizing Holocaust by consistently fighting against the denial and distortion of Holocaust. This is very important. Internally, we institutionalized the function of the National Coordinator for Fighting Anti-Semitism at the Deputy Minister level. This high political level allows continuity and shows how important this function is for us. In parallel, we've been working for the preparation of the first National Action Plan for Fighting Anti-Semitism and Preserving the Jewish Cultural Heritage. This should be adopted in the spring of 23. I can assure you that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will continue to follow the zero-tolerance policy towards hate speech, discrimination and hate crimes. And thus, I wish you a very beneficial discussion, and I welcome once again the organizers. They should continue organizing similar discussions in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to hand over to Mr. Boyan Magdalinchev, who is representing the Supreme Judicial Council. Madam Vice President of the Republic of Bulgaria, Mr. Geshev, Prosecutor General, President of the European Jewish Association, Mr. Zarkov, Minister of Justice, ladies and gentlemen, Prosecutors General and representatives of the European Prosecutors' offices, representatives of the Bulgarian Academia, representatives of the religious communities, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be invited to this important conference. The presence of all of us here representing different national and international institutions, NGOs and religious communities confirms our common commitment in the fight against hate speech and the manifestations of different forms of discrimination, intolerance, or aggression to difference. The protection of dignity, freedoms are deep-rooted values in the European societies and culture and institutions. And back in 1950, the member states of the Council of Europe adopted the European Convention on Human Rights, which now for more than 80 years is a foundation of justice and peace, not only in Europe, but all over the world. The fight against hate speech is one of the priorities, top priorities in Europe. In the speech on the State of the European Union in 2020, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, underscored that the progress in the fight against racism and hate and hatred is fragile, and it's fought and won with a lot of efforts and can be easily lost. And she said that all forms of hate crimes and hate crimes should be included in the legislation, irrespective of race, gender, or nationality. Any manifestation of discrimination, no matter what the basis is, gender, religion, whatever, is against the values of the European Union. Respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, state, and respect of human rights, including children's rights and including the rights of people from minority groups. They are not only in the Charter of Rights, but also it's there in Article 2 of the founding treaty of the European Union, whereby the Union is based on respect of human dignity, freedom, equality, democracy, rule of law state, and respect for human rights, including the rights of minority groups. And this is valid for all member states, and the basis is gender equality, fairness, justice. And from that perspective, the fight against hate speech is a serious commitment of a rule of law state in order to contribute to the well-being of all citizens, because hate speech and hate crimes, they affect not only the victims or the communities, but they also directly attack the involvement of each and every democratic community based on diversity and difference. The issue became especially topical in the recent decades, where in some parts of Europe the cases of hate crimes, hate speech have become more tangible in the digital space and in the media. The possibility for quick and anonymous sharing of all sorts of content, the lack of clear regulation, this creates a feeling of impunity. Social isolation, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, brought about distancing between people, created conditions for division among societies. We also need to mention the efforts of European institutions focused on fine-tuning the legislative framework and better regulation of this area in order to strengthen the framework for a common response to racist and xenophobic speech, hate speech and hate crimes through the framework decision of the Council 2008-213. In response to the new challenges in the context of the fast development of digital services that are very important for the everyday life of millions of European citizens. This is the Regulation 2020-65 and adopted by the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers that will become effective in February next year. Let me now end with a quote. If you answer hate with hate, will multiply hate and will make the night, the starless night, even darker. Only light can conquer hate. Hate cannot conquer hate. Only love can do it. So, esteemed participants in today's conference, I wish you fruitful work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Magdalinchev. Now, I give the floor to Lada Paunova, Deputy Chair of the Supreme Court of Cassation and Head of the Criminal Panel. Madam Vice President, Minister of Justice, Prosecutor General, Mr. Chair of the European Jewish Association, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome you on behalf of the Chair of the Supreme Court of Cassation, Galina Zakharova. The holding of the International Conference Stop Hate Speech at the initiative of the Bulgarian Prosecutor's Office, together with the European Jewish Association, is undoubtedly among the timely and practical approaches for discussing ideas and finding working solutions focused at prevention, but also at counteracting hate speech, discrimination, and hate crimes. I'm convinced that within this conference we are yet to place a highlight on at least two main issues, namely whether the laws are adequate and whether the competent authorities are applying the law with the necessary detail. We need these answers because for the past years we have witnessed increasing public manifestations which are not compatible with the standards for human rights, such as aggressiveness and intolerance towards representatives of various ethnic or religious minorities, infringing on the rights of people with untraditional sexual orientation caused by homophobia, acts of violence caused by hate. Similar acts engender insecurity and conflicts among people, undermine the institutional trust, and break the cohesiveness of society. The International Conference Stop Hate Speech allows us to once again remind publicly that events popularizing hate speech are not to be allowed by our society, which has adopted the democratic principles. Undoubtedly, the Bulgarian institution and the European human rights, we have the right of everybody to disseminate their opinion, to look and disseminate information. This right is a core right, but it's not absolute, which is why this right, this freedom, can be limited and sanctions in order to guarantee other as important rights and freedoms. There can be no statements that the freedom of speech should be defended when there is anti-Semitism, intolerance, racism. We all recognize the need of having working models for clear distribution of responsibilities among state authorities, inclusion of local authorities and of civil society, and providing active participation of minority groups in the process of encouraging multicultural dialogue and prevention of hate speech. Only if we fully understand the depth of the essence of the problem and counteracting hate speech actions will we drown down the public feeling of invincibility. I wish you all the best. Judge Galina Zakharova, Chair, President of the Supreme Court of Cassation.
And now, let's see the video addresses by our European partners. Let's now see the address by Mr. Manfred, who is the chair of the European People's Party at the European Parliament.
Dear Vice President Yotova, dear Geshev, dear Minister of Justice Zarkov, dear participants of the conference, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to participate in today's conference on hate speech along with such professionals in their fields. This is exactly what we need to create a better environment for future generations. Let me start by thanking the organizers of this conference, as the issue of battling hate speech must result in real actions from all stakeholders involved. Hate speech does not concern one member state of the European Union or another. Hate speech is a threat to the proper functioning of our democratic society, and it undermines our values such as respect and solidarity. For this reason, more should be done at the European level. About 2 years ago, the European Union started a new initiative on extending the list of EU crimes to include all forms of hate crime and hate speech. Whether based on sexuality, gender, race or religion, the Commission has deemed these crimes particularly serious due to their negative effect on individuals or whole societal groups. It is especially important to emphasize the cross-border nature of online hate speech. For this reason, the Commission designated a common European approach to combating this threat in a more effective way, as opposed to individual nations doing it on their own. It is important to mention that this initiative is part of a broader set of actions at an EU level. The European Parliament, the issue of hate speech has also been addressed in a number of resolutions and debates. For example, in June 2017, the European Parliament adopted a resolution on combating anti-Semitism. The text insists on the need to provide enforcement authorities with targeted training on combating hate, crime and discrimination. The European Parliament also calls for establishing dedicated anti-hate units in police forces where they do not exist yet. Also in 2019, we have called, as European People's Party group, for a European plan against anti-Semitism in the European elections. With the European Commission, Vice President Margaritis Skinner's EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, the European People's Party is delivering on its promise. The most recent resolution of the European Parliament, adopted in May 2022, pointed to religious-based hate crimes that remain underreported and under-prosecuted. It called for establishing comprehensive data collection systems on hate crimes and other discriminatory acts against belief or religious communities. Besides enforcement authorities, it is equally important for society as a whole to take part in the fight against hate speech, especially today with the development of new technologies and social media. Teaching our kids to be tolerant towards their counterparts from different societal, religious or race groups proves vital to counter the growing number of hate crimes in our Union. While many of the technologies in social media rewards polarization, we must reward mutual respect and understanding in our societies. Combating hate and violence means also adopting stricter laws on removing terrorist content online. Individuals and social media should be made responsible for their roles. Our societies are under constant attack by extremists who spread hate and violence via social media onto the screens of our younger generations. To conclude, I would like to point out that on a European level many steps have been taken and are continuing to be taken to fight against hate speech and to limit its impact on our societies. Ultimately, it depends on all of us to reach the positive results we are looking for. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish you an engaging and productive debate in your conference.
And now we'll hear the address by Mr. Ilhan Kyuchyuk, who is the Renew Europe group at the European Parliament.
Mr. Geshev, dear Rabbi Margolin, the Stop Hate Speech conference organized under the initiative of the Prosecution Office of the Republic of Bulgaria and the European Jewish Association is a timely event at a moment when attempts to replace togetherness and multiculturalism with disintegration of society are creeping more and more into public discourse. And hate rhetoric is used even at institutional level at times. Why should this worrying trend be of pan-European importance? Because the European Union was founded on the ashes of a hateful autocracies of the Second World War, building up the values of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and human rights, including the rights of minorities. These are not just the cornerstones of the EU, they are its raison d'etre. Undoubtedly, the action taken at the European level for raising awareness, the work in the high-level group on combating hate speech and hate crimes, enhancing best practices and fostering cooperation are important. Yet, it is also a matter of understanding of the erosive nature of this phenomenon for the citizens and a matter of commitment of the national authorities. That is why I'm particularly happy to see forums like the one you organized together, and why I appreciate the firmly declared readiness of Bulgaria's prosecution office to actively oppose and counteract the spread of anti-Semitic attitudes and hate speech. Distinguished audience, preventing and fighting against hate speech and the crimes based on ethnic and religious intolerance is vital for our democratic societies. Because history clearly showed us that a hate crime are not a crime against an individual, but a danger to our European way of life. I wish you fruitful further discussions at the Stop Hate Speech Conference.
Let's hear one more address by Mr. Adrian Vasquez Lozara, who is the chair of the Libe Committee at the European Parliament.
But the illness of hate remains a serious threat to our peaceful coexistence. The growth of the internet economy has developed a big field of new opportunities for everyone in terms of access to knowledge and development of new skills. Nevertheless, it has also created a wide space for spreading fake news and suffering new types of bullying or digital discrimination. Within these new venues for harmful content, one of the most dangerous practices our societies are facing is hate speech. According to United Nations, hate implies an offensive discourse targeting a social group or an individual based on inherent characteristics such as race, religion, or gender. It is by several studies that we now know the severe effects that hate speech has on its victims in terms of mental health, and it can trigger much darker social consequences. Unfortunately, the increase of this type of cases is becoming a widespread serious problem in open societies like ours. According to a recent report of the Center for the Fight Against Digital Hate, 84% of the anti-Semitic attacks on social networks go unpunished. In order to tackle this problem, the European Union approved in 2020 a piece of legislation like the Digital Service Act. This regulation, which entered into force last week, set out new effective measures for all actors in the online ecosystem to counter illegal content. The global aim is the detection, flagging, and removal of the toxic content that circulates through the internet without any control. The DSA measures, based on a due diligence system obligations for online platforms, are a great innovative example of political actions capable of implementing the prevention of hate speech and the defense of the fundamental right of freedom of speech. However, at the European Union, the definition of hate speech is still non-existent. This means that the DSA, this piece of legislation, will be really applied by the European Union states in accordance with their national hate speech laws. This situation raises legal uncertainties and tempers the homogeneity of equal rights along the European Union. Europe means peace, human rights, and overall unity to achieve a better world for everyone. Hate is just the opposite. We must stand up together against this terrible social scourge and fight for strong legal solutions.
I'd like to thank all who addressed the conference at the opening session. And now I'd like to introduce Mr. Alexander Benjamin, who is representing the European Jewish Association in Brussels, and he will be moderating the first panel discussion that will be on the crimes against religion and the countering crimes.
I'll be with you for the next hour and 20 minutes or so, and I'm actually going to sit down now, and we'll get this moderation underway. Thank you. Sorry, a very brief move over. I'd like to once again thank the Prosecutor General for having the vision and commitment to host this important conference. I wish there were more of them across Europe. In the next day and a bit now, we're going to hear from a number of experts. A lot of you are engaged in legal activities, finding the political and legal tools to combat hate speech. But in this panel, I particularly want to introduce you to people who have been often victims of hate speech. One such person is with us today, who came all the way from Israel. I'm going to give you a very, very brief background. In 2018, I beg your pardon, her grandmother, an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor, was murdered in her apartment in Paris by two of her neighbors, who stabbed her multiple times and then set her on fire. This was, as I say, a Holocaust survivor. Her granddaughter, Keren Knoll, has spoken at a number of our conferences, and she's here to say a few words with you today about what that experience was like and what she's doing to combat hate speech. Keren, it's a great pleasure to welcome you, and please join us.
We all know hate. We have all felt this feeling a few times in our lives. It's a dark feeling that will squeeze your heart and flash your body with heat. But for most people, it eventually will pass. Most of us will not even remember what it was all about. According to the dictionary, hate usually derives from fear, anger, or a sense of injury. But for some people, the feeling is cultivated from a young age, becoming part of the culture of who they are. Most of them don't even know what it's all about. They were never part of the narrative, but still, they will cherish and feed it. I grew up in Paris as a secular Jewish family. We didn't have a religious appearance. We didn't eat kosher. And we practiced the beauty that holidays offer. So the Hanukkah is next to the Christmas tree. For a couple of years, we had a Polish nanny living with us, a student, age of 22. When my mother decided to make Aliyah to Israel, she told the nanny that was absolutely shocked. She asked, "Why? Why would you go there?" "Why not?" my mother asked. "There's Jews there. They have tails and noses, big noses." It must sound funny, I'm sure it's do, but it's not. I will let you imagine this nanny face when my mom told her she was living with Jews. Last week, Israeli reporters went to cover the Soccer World Cup in Qatar. For those of you who don't know, Israeli reporters are tough. They are going through a lot in their careers. But I must tell you, the hostility they felt every time they say they were from Israel shocked them. Even with a common cause, haters couldn't rise above their prejudice. We all have been raised by values that define us today. My grandmother, Mireille Knoll, was an amazing woman. She loved life. In any occasion she had, you would have found her in restaurants, or dancing, or in theaters and movies, or all of the above. She taught me to seize the moment, to live my life fully, and to love fiercely. When she was brutally murdered, I couldn't help the dissonance between her life and her death.
Valeurs niées par le terroriste de Trèbes, valeurs niées par le meurtrier de Mireille Knoll, qui a assassiné une femme innocente et vulnérable parce qu'elle était juive, et qui ainsi a profané nos valeurs sacrées et notre mémoire.
My grandmother was murdered by 2 Muslims. Do I hate all Muslims now? I don't. Do I fear them? I fear all the extremists. In memory of my grandmother, I'm choosing the light. I'm devoting myself to speaking up and telling her story to whoever is ready to listen, reminding everyone that hate and anti-Semitism are very much alive. In 2022, I expect hatred to not manipulate the perception of people. I was expecting for stereotypes of Jews to be broken by now, especially those from 80 years ago, and for the cultivation of lies to be done. We still have a lot of work to do. As we're among leaders today, please choose the light and lead the way.
Keren, thank you. If you don't mind staying, I've got a couple of questions for you, and I'd like to make it clear that during this symposium or conference, if there are any questions from the floor, you can see some microphones up the side of the room. We would like to make this as interactive as possible, and it's very, very important that we hear your points of view. Karen, if you want to come and sit, or it's entirely up to you. If you're happier standing up, I'll turn that off. I'll get that on for you. So, Karen, I was struck. First of all, I want to say you'll forgive me if I had my back to the video. I've seen that video before, and it's extremely difficult for me to watch it without getting emotional. So, first and foremost, thank you for being here. Thank you for having the courage to tell your story in front of, for all intents and purposes, a bunch of strangers. And I was very struck by what you said about the stereotypes about your Polish nanny or cleaner, because the same thing happened to me. I just wanted to share briefly. I used to work in the European Parliament, and I had a sign on my door in Hebrew, and a young lady, a graduate from the University of Bologna, one of the finest academic institutions in Europe, arguably, came in and said, "Listen, you're Jewish, Alex." I said, "I am." He said, I've got this slight business problem. And I thought, I'll go, here we go. I was sort of looking around for the cameras, and then added, my father's having problems in his business. I heard that if Jews curse people, it really works. So of course that sort of shocked me a bit, and I needed a smart reply. So I said, well, yes, it's actually true, but it only works amongst us. It doesn't work against others. And then she proceeded to add, but it is true that you can pick the sex of your own babies. So this is a kind of ignorance that is still prevalent today, the kind of superstitious anti-Semitism which is still prevalent, as well as the more manifestly hateful type, which obviously resulted in the brutal murder of your grandmother. But Karen, I just wanted to hear your thoughts. I mean, you're in a room here with some of the brightest legal and political minds in Europe. If you had a message for these people to take home with them after their deliberations, what would it be? And what do you think your grandmother would like them to take with them too? If that's not too difficult a question, Karen.
I must say that if my grandmother was alive, she will really appreciate the intention and that everybody knows her. And she's like a symbol in France. In the march, the White March, there were 30,000 people. And there were singers there that she liked. And we were laughing about, if she only knew, she was so happy to know that there was like singers she liked in the march for her. I must tell you that it's a relief to know that I hope she didn't know what happened to her there, because she wouldn't believe it. And we spoke to the Prime Minister and the President of France, and we asked him what next. Salah Halima was 1 year before, it was the same story. Now it's my grandmother. Who's next, when, and what are you going to do about it? And I don't remember his answers, because I don't remember he told me something that I could work with. And it took 3 years, as they know the killers, to prosecute them. 3 years with a bloody knife and everything. They just waited. So if I can ask you something, be proactive and act fast. For humankind, not only for Jewish, but for everybody. If a crime has been made, just do something about it in your own circles. That's what I'm doing now. I hope it will help.
Thanks, Karen. And you mentioned what the President and the Prime Minister of France had said. Of course, since then, we've also had the case of Mr. Samuel Paty. Everyone familiar with what happened to Mr. Paty? He was a school teacher in France who was beheaded for starting a conversation and he ended up showing, I believe it was a depiction of the prophet. Was it from Charlie Hebdo? So wherever it was from. Karen, I guess my question is, I mean, what hope do you have for education? Because a lot of this hate starts at home. In fact, I'm going to hear from one of my guests a bit later who had an experience with a very, very young child which shocked him. But in terms of educators, what role do you see as educators having in combating hate speech, and should they have the courage of Mr. Paty to just come out and call it as he sees it?
So as I said in my speech, I believe that hate is cultivated at home, and even the children who are not part of the narrative are listening and believing that what the parent says, that's our role as parents anyway. So as we educate, we need to show always the other side, and to make meetings with schools of classes of Muslims, of Christian, of whatever, with Jewish, or with other people, to show them that there's other cultures, other religions. It's okay, there's a place for all of us here. And to make a discussion, so they will own, everyone should own his own persuasion.
Just on that, just looking a bit more on education, I got one more question after that, then I'm going to open it up to the floor. So if anyone has any questions, please make it known. But Karen, you now live in Israel, and Israel, as we know, is a place that has some conflict. You have a couple of children. Yotova, there's another one on the way. The question is, how do you, in that environment, in that difficult environment where there is conflict, how do you raise them not to hate when, for instance, there is in the news, you know, a soldier's been run over, or a stabbing attack, or a bomb in Jerusalem? How is it, what are the challenges of raising children not to hate in that environment?
It's a good question. It's a good question. There's a lot of haters in Israel too. Okay, it's important to say. I have Shabbat dinners with people say, let's kill all the Arabs. And I'm like, no, let's not. It's important to not make, how do you say in Achlana? Like it's all him in Hebrew. To not make a group of people a target, because it's not their fault if something happened. I'm telling my kids that every people are not the same. We all have habits, and we're different, and it's okay. It's okay to be different. We need to educate to differences, and everyone have his own opinion, and it's okay. The thing that I'm telling them, that there's bad and there's good. They need to choose the good, and that's it. That's all what I can do right now.
That's an important lesson. I mean, I try and do the same with my kid. Okay, the last question, Karen, from me before I open it up to the floor might be a difficult one. You used to live in France. You grew up in France. You now live in Israel. Would you feel safe as a Jew coming back to live in Europe? What would be your number one concern? It doesn't have to be moving back to France, but let's say you had an offer to come to Sofia or Vienna or Berlin. What's your instant reaction to that as a Jew? Tough question, sorry.
Yes, it is. As a Jew living in Israel, it's already tough, but I know what I'm dealing with. So as you know what you're dealing with, you have some ground floor. I know what's happening in France. I know that you can speak freely. I think that's why the president mumbled when I asked the question, because they don't know how to act. They don't know what to do. I have no idea how to answer this question because it's not something I'm seeing myself doing anyway. I'm 25 years in Israel. I've been 10 years in the army. And I think when we will all know exactly what we're dealing with, it will be easier for us to respond.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Do we have any questions from the floor, ladies and gentlemen? There are microphones up the side. I encourage you not to be shy. But if there are no questions, then I will add one more, if I may. I feel like an auctioneer looking around the room but anyway. So Karen, one more question, kind of follow on from the one I just asked. How do Jews in Israel feel about the diaspora and what they're going through at the moment? I know that's a very, very broad question, but how is Europe viewed from Israel right now as a place that obviously in Israeli minds, a lot of generation, people that made Aliyah, coming out of a Second World War, from pogroms in the first Aliyah, etc. How do they see what's going on in Europe? Do they have an attitude of Europe is beyond repair, or are they hopeful?
I think when something happening in Europe, we're glad to be in Israel. And when something happened in Israel, we say it's too bad we're not in Europe. So it's really depend on the case. That's it.
Okay. Keren, before I let you go, it's always a pleasure to hear from you. And it's a pleasure because I rarely meet people that have been through what you've been through in that personal experience in your family who, as you said at the beginning, you don't have this bitterness in your heart. And I find that quite incredible, because I would struggle to think what I would be like if such an experience happened to me, and that you have the strength, the courage, and the positivity to come to conferences like this and talk to people. It's really greatly appreciated, and I'm honored to count you as a friend. So Keren, thank you so much for being here, and I encourage anyone in the audience over the next day and a half to talk to Keren and gather as much as you can and hear about her grandmother's life, hear what her grandmother stood for and what Keren stands for today. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Keren Knoll. Thanks again, Keren. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move swiftly on. It's my great pleasure to ask the representatives of both the Orthodox and Catholic churches here in Bulgaria, Episcop Polycarp and Alexander Moshev, to please join me on the stage. And I shall put on my headphones. It's looking... Please have a seat. Mr. Moshe, right? Very nice. So it's always a bit interesting this when it's being relayed. I believe you have some opening statements that you'd like to make first. So if I could invite you, sir, first. Of course, you feel free to use the podium if you prefer. Thank you.
Prosecutor General, leaders of religious communities, participants and guests to this conference entitled Stop Hate Speech, organized by the Prosecutor's office in Bulgaria. We're living in a complex, dynamic world which questions numerous basic characteristics of human relations and values of societies. Mutual help, caring for the weak, unity and understanding, sense of belonging to the community and social commitment. In its encyclical on fraternity and social friendship entitled Fratelli Tutti, All My Friends, the Holy Father turns attention to numerous negative circumstances, including hate speech. He said, even when people are locked within their convenient consumerism isolation, they can constantly delve into hostility and verbal abuse, which is destructive for the others. This can be accompanied by a lack of restraint, which would be impossible in truly physical contact without destroying us completely. Computers and mobile devices provide opportunities for social aggression. And all of this opens up freedom for ideologies, thing which several years ago couldn't be said aloud without leading to loss of respect. Today can be said without any penalty, even by politicians. The way platforms operate ultimately contributes for the meetings among people who think alike and thus limits the opportunities for debate. These closed circuits facilitate the dissemination of fake news and untrue information, sparking prejudice and hatred. The ability to sit and listen to the other is a necessary prerequisite for the acceptance. People should accept others in their lives. However, in today's world, people are deaf. Sometimes the dynamic rhythm of contemporary life hinders us to listen carefully what the other is saying. We interrupt the other, and we are ready to counteract him even before he has finished his sentence. We shouldn't lose our capacity to listen. Where and how to look for medicine against all these negative circumstances? How can we go along the path of healing of individual and collective wounds by hatred, of unrecognition of the other, the weaker? Here's what the Holy Father said with regard to this. It's worthwhile listening to these and applying them in practice. Together, we can look for truth in dialogue, in a calm conversation or heated debate. This requires continuity. It requires moments of silence and pain, but it also needs to have empathy. We cannot manage to focus our attention and to go deeper and to distinguish the essential thing which can lend sense to our life. Then freedom turns into an illusion which we are being sold. The process of building fraternity, local or general, can be taken only by free spirits, ready for authentic meetings. I'd like to turn attention to one part of the Bible in which Jesus said, I was a stranger and you took me in. Jesus can say these words because he has an open heart, sensitive to the hardships of the others. St. Paul is urging us, enjoy life with those who enjoy life and cry with those who cry. When our hearts are capable of this, they can identify with the others without worrying where they were born or where they come from. In this process, we start to empathize with others. Faith has the power to inspire and maintain our respect to the others, because believers recognize that God lives every man and woman with ultimate love and thus gives the whole of mankind with dignity. approaching the other, talking, listening, watching, getting to know, mutual respect, and finding common language. All of this is summarized in one word: dialogue. In a pluralistic society, dialogue is the best way to recognize what needs to be established and respected. This dialogue needs to be enriched, and there should be clear thought, rational arguments from different viewpoints with the benefit of other spheres of knowledge. We should never forget the language of love. As the Romans say, omnia vincit amor. Love conquers everything. Today we are lacking love, which is why peace suffers. A Christian is to eliminate his enemy by loving. Do we believe this is possible? If love is true, we get love in return. Let's love to be loved, and then on earth we will see how Jesus wanted to love each other like I loved you. Mutual love is the art of loving. I think that the Holy Father said something important. If we believe in God, we will respect life and the dignity of others, and be dedicated to the well-being of everybody. He who hasn't loved doesn't know God, because God is love. Allow me to finish with part of a prayer. Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty, which is reflected in all peoples on earth, in order to find out that everybody is important, everybody is necessary, everybody is a different face of the same humanity that you fell in love with. Amen. On behalf of the Episcopal Conference of the Catholic Church in Bulgaria, I wish you beneficial work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moshev. And if I could ask Episcop Polycarp as well, if you'd like to say a few words, or you're happy?
I was already there, so allow me to remain seated. We have spoken about Bulgaria, that it's an example of tolerance, peace, unity among Jews, Christians, Muslims. In many towns of Bulgaria, the Jewish synagogue and the Christian temple and the mosque are in close proximity to one another. Somebody would say that this is by chance. Another person might say that this is only rightly so. But it's important that this is a fact, and Bulgaria, in this way, is occupying its rightful place among the ranks of peace, unity, and understanding among different religions. Something that we're proud of, something that creates a very good image of Bulgaria in the world. But very often, when we talk about such situations, we are proud of what our forefathers have created, what they have inherited. They have a legacy towards it, but we need to be proud not only of what our forefathers have done, but to live what they have left us as an example. However, we should forward it to the future generations, to those who come after us, because our forefathers have lived in peace, in understanding, all together. As we often say, the spiritual leaders in Bulgaria know how to have coffee together. Unfortunately, politicians, people who have nothing to do with spirituality, they cannot even sit to drink water together. So this example that spiritual leaders are giving, be they of the East Orthodox Church or the leaders of the Protestant or Catholic Church or Jews or Muslims, what we do as an example is important evidence that in order to have a fight against hate speech, we need this to start from the temple, from the synagogue, from the mosque. This should be transferred through the spiritual temples of the family, through the education of children, so that at one point, when children leave the home, to transfer the same values to the community as a whole, to be transferred to those who are around us, and of course, to be a good pretext, to be this good example to be followed. Unfortunately, there are a lot of examples in the world in which religious leaders do the opposite, have hate speech and a brother killing a brother. But in such a time, the good example should suffocate the bad example, and we should witness that the good is followed, so that from a religious peace we will see the political peace and social peace and brotherly love. And often when we speak as Christians about the right kind of relations among men and women, we need to place ourselves in the shoes of the other, no matter what the other is, where they come from, what they have in their heart, to put ourselves in the other's shoes. And when we do so, then what will form an impact will not be the hate, but love. Of course, in this time, speaking of these situations, it is necessary to have the knowledge and the right way to react to provocations aimed at Christians, Jews, Muslims. Often we provoke hatred, even in the subconscious level. So it's necessary that we know to look for, and when we find such a situation, to stop ourselves and to reconsider. Of course, very often artists, journalists provoke or ridicule the religious in men. And often we can see this on part of Christians who ridicule the faith and spirituality, and from then on, as we have heard the Greek proverb, nothing sacred remains. Then you have no boundary, there is no limit, and you can easily hate, you can easily kill. There is no boundary. While we need, all of us, speaking about hate, about fighting hate speech, we need to see everything, to take into account everything, and to give a positive example. And this shouldn't be something we're proud of our forefathers, but this should be even something present and, God willingly, future.
Thank you. I'm just going to take my headphones off. I have a brief question for both of you, if I may. So, religion gets a blamed an awful lot for being the cause of a lot of hate and division in the world. And yet we see a more secular society year on year. And I'm looking at recent figures. I don't know if you saw, gentlemen, but in the UK, it was the first time since they started censuses where a majority of people didn't identify themselves as Christian. In Poland, at the weekend, I was reading that the pews of the Catholic Church are becoming increasingly empty. And I'm wondering what your views are, gentlemen. Is it a case of without the moral and ethical foundation that religion provides, without that, are we seeing a direct rise of hate speech? And do you fear for the future as this sort of creeping secularism continues to grow? I mean, just as an aside, there was a sort of funny story that the vegans were already in on it from creation, in that if we had have eaten a snake, we would have been okay, but in the end, they made us eat the apple. So anyway, I'd just be interested in your thoughts on this creeping secularism and its effect on potential hate speech. So perhaps if we can start with Mr. Moshev.
Basically, all of the problems are due to the lack of knowledge. When you generalize, when you don't want to make, so to speak, genuine observations of certain problems, you are an easy target for fanaticism, for all of this stuff. And if you want to genuinely search for the truth, for a problem, if you want to get to the core of a problem, you would never be subjected to generalizations or to all types of prejudice. So the answer is love. The answer lays in wanting to truly understand and to truly get to know a certain problem in its core. So I don't know if the secularization is a threat or if it's really a serious trend, but the answer for me is in Christian love.
So, same question to you.
What is perhaps important to say is that the more a society develops, the more it seems that in its wealth and rapture and in everything that the society thinks it has achieved, it loses the spiritual, the valuable, it loses faith. And that is why gradually a society that is built in this way, at some point of time, it obliterates itself. It disappears. We often say that you don't need to have the whole world, but you need to have God in your heart. And when you have God in your heart, you will have anything you need. When you have the world, you lose God. And again, society, history, world history of mankind has shown this. But generally speaking, to the question, I think we need to answer by saying that we need to do a lot of work, whether it is in Bulgaria or the UK or the US. Religious leaders, the church, all religious communities, they need to work a lot. And they need to work in the right direction, which is the direction towards faith, towards faith and peace and love for each other. Because otherwise, there's no way that what we are talking about will bear fruit in the world we live in. So on the one hand, it's very difficult, but on the other hand, it's very easy. The question is that we need to work, and indeed a lot, and we need to set a good example. And there is an important point. There is a proverb, out of sight, out of mind. So it's important to focus on the issues and seek common solutions and support each other. The Jewish for the Christians for the Muslims for the Jews, for the Christians, for everybody. It's necessary that we go hand in hand. When we are together, then all societies will be united. When we are divided, all societies will be divided. So that's the way, that's the approach, and this is the only way we can achieve a good results, and this will be the legacy for the next generations.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, for your thoughts, and for sharing your opinions with our audience. And I'd like to move on to our next panelist. But ladies and gentlemen, can we please put your hands together? Thank you. And just before I call up our next guest, I would like to send a special thank you to our interpreters at the back of the room. They really are wonderful people, and it's helping me immensely conduct this moderation, so thank you. So it's my great pleasure now to invite to address this important conference Mustafa Hadzi, the Grand Mufti, if you'd care to join us. Thank you so much. And come and join me.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Уважаемый господин Geshev.
Honorable Mr. Geshev, Prosecutor General of the Republic of Bulgaria, honorable representatives of religious communities, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank and commend the Prosecutor General and all the organizers of this conference, which is very important, not only for Bulgaria, but for the whole world. And I'm proud that this is now taking place in Bulgaria, because in Bulgaria, there is tolerance between people. It doesn't matter which religion they represent or follow. So we can be an example for the world of how we can live together and how people can love each other and support each other. Bulgaria rescued its Jews, and after the fall of communism, Muslims and Christians who lived through the revival process together. They did not want revenge. They united to find a better way of life and to do their best to keep respect, understanding, and support for the future generations. Hatred is something that is born in human heart. If I may quote, this heart is a sea and the mouth is the coast of the sea. So what is in the sea at some point goes out on the coast. This means that if somebody speaks against another person, doesn't matter whether this person is different religiously or ethnically, this means that this person will be more miserable than the ones he's speaking against, because because hatred will eat away his mind. He cannot live peacefully. Hatred is a feeling that should be healed at the very beginning. And that is why when we say that when someone speaks, someone feels hatred and speaks in this way, he should first of all heal his heart and then his mouth. And we now live in times when we all think we have rights, but we don't think we have obligations. And that is why I should say that this conference is different from similar conferences all over the world. It's different because we have here not only religious and political leaders, we've got here people who are decision makers. They can make steps to improve relations between people. And in this train of thought, we have to see that we all live with people who are like us. When we live with other people, we have to make efforts to do our best to be respected. But before that, we have to show respect. Before we get understood, we have to understand other people. And that is why if we live in this way, we'll be able to solve many issues. If we live in this way, if we understand that this world does not belong to any one of us, but everyone has the right to live in this world. If we understand this reality, maybe greed, envy, avarice, they will disappear and people will find a common language to live together. People understand each other when they speak. And we heard from the previous speakers that when people see each other, they can understand each other better. There is a Turkish proverb meaning the same: out of sight, out of mind. So that is why we've got to make efforts to understand each other, to be together, to understand that love is what will give us the response. And the response is love. It's naive to think that hatred can do the job. Globally, the first one who gave a pension to an old person, an old man, was the third caliph. And he did not give this pension to a Muslim, but to a Jew. But unfortunately, we can see that followers of that same religion, using the religion for political purposes, kill innocent people. We as Muslims and we as religious people cannot agree with such acts. Moreover, hatred, and what I said earlier, well, it harms the one who feels hatred. So, and also the incorrect interpretation of religious postulates harms the followers of that religion. Here in Bulgaria, we live together. I don't know whether there is a similar organization in other parts of the world. We have a national council, a religious council, and we've got the 6 main denominations sitting on that council, and they discuss issues related to all the religious communities. We try to find common solutions, including the teaching of religion at schools, because we can see that people from a very early age, they start using computers and they are taught how to win over other people, how to use violence with different games, and children learn to hate. We have to stand against this. And I use the occasion to thank the representatives of the judiciary, because they're the people who are empowered to intervene, and let's all together try to protect our children, our adolescents, from incorrect bringing up, incorrect attitude, because only love, understanding and good attitude, it can save humanity. Otherwise, we are at risk of destroying ourselves, and I'm sure that none of us will want this. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to thank the organizers, and all the best.
Thank you. So I'll give you a chance to get your headphones on, Grand Mufti. Okay? We good? Okay, wonderful. So thank you for those wise, sage words. And I didn't know about the third caliph, so that's a wonderful story to take back to Brussels with me. Grand Mufti, I have a question. I was talking to the Prosecutor General this morning, because one of the first things you notice staying in this hotel is there's a church behind me, another one in the square. I saw a mosque minaret. This is a community, or whenever I'm in Sofia, I'm always struck by the fact that it's a place almost like the old city in Jerusalem, where various religious communities have found a shared space, and you've been together for hundreds of years, often through tumultuous times, under various rulers or whatever, but still there is this sense of accommodation and this sense of respect for, as Rabbi Sachs so eloquently put it, the dignity of difference. My question, Grand Mufti, is this: with populism, secularism, the social media hatred on the rise, is that peace, or do you feel that peace, which is clearly and evident in this city, do you see it as under threat? Do you see it as a rising threat? And if so, what do you think can be done about it?
Thank you for this question. Well, in general, I do not think that the restriction of anyone's rights will contribute to the freedoms of other people. At the same time, we've got to know that the rights, the limit of the rights of each one of us is where the rights of the other person start. That is why secularism, even if it is a isolated individual phenomena, like someone can say that they're atheist. Globally and historically, there has been no atheistic society. People have always had their faith, their principles of religious following. They have always followed some moral values. When religious values are gone, human values are gone. When human values are gone, there's a risk of destroying humanity. That is why we should not say that people are religious or secular. We should not judge what they are based on whether they go to church service. Everyone has their own understanding of religion. But of course, when the key principles of religion are broken, especially if those principles are used to the detriment of humanity, we cannot agree. So it's easy to understand that I can be happy when people around me are happy. I cannot be happy when people around me are suffering. We don't need to go far. And the fresh example of this is the war in Ukraine. People are suffering, but those who are most suffering are the unprotected ones, those who are at risk of, who are exposed to military attacks, first of all, because of this persecution and harassment. And on the other hand, mankind in general, not only in Ukraine, does not make enough efforts to solve conflicts on the global stage. That is why I said, and I will repeat this, this conference is different from many others that I participated in before, because here we've got people who are really engaged with people's problems, and religion, after all, including Islam, has a goal to preserve 5 things: the freedom of religious conviction, beliefs; second, health and life of people; third, dignity and honor of people; fourth, the reason of people; and finally, the property of people. These 5 things, they are inviolable and nobody can touch them. Thank you.
Thank you, Grand Mufti. Thank you so much for that, Grand Mufti. Would now like to move swiftly on, because all being well, I shall finish more or less on time. If you'll allow me 5 minutes here or there, I'll do my level best. So moving on, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce the following panel, which is Jewish spiritual leaders. I'd like to call up Chief Rabbi Benjamin Jacobs, the Chief Rabbi of the Netherlands and also the chairman of our own committee for combating anti-Semitism, and Mr. Alexander Oskar, the chairman of the Organization of Jews in Bulgaria, from Shalom. Shalom ve Shalom. So, gentlemen, yes, I guess so. I think there's a spare couple. You're okay? Wonderful. So we'll get things underway. Of course, Chief Rabbi Jacobs, if you want to make an opening remarks, you're very welcome to use the podium. But the floor is yours before I hand over to Alexander Oskar.
Just in order to support you with your 5 minutes, I'll make it very short. There came a lady by a famous rabbi, Chofetz Chaim, who was writing a lot about Lashon Hara, speaking evil about other people. And she spoke not nice things about somebody, and she regretted it. So she went to the rabbi and said, asked the rabbi, how could I repair this? I spoke evil about the person, and I want to repair it. So he told her, take a pillow. A pillow was filled with feathers. Go to the street. On the corner of the street is a lot of wind. Open the pillow, and what will happen? All the feathers will spread around. And then you have to try to get them back into the pillow. What is mission impossible? To speak evil about another person is a very, very serious sin, crime. Because like with words, you can revive people, you also can kill them. I just want to share with you a few things in Holland. A few months ago, I was walking in the street, and it's not an exception, but it happened to be a few months ago. A little boy, about 6 years old, comes to me and starts screaming at me, "Free Palestine." I was wondering, now he is accusing me of something. He's screaming at me. What will happen in 10 years' time if this boy will walk around with a knife? I wanted to speak to his parents. And I called the police, they know me. But at the end of the story, I still did not talk to them. That's serious. Because this little boy is being educated with hate against me, and I'm not allowed, I don't get the opportunity to fix it. An old guy, he died last year. He was my friend. His name was Dan Cohen. I met him years and years and years ago. And every 6 weeks he used to come to my house. And we used to learn. He was brilliant, very intelligent person. He was a survivor. And he told me that when he came to the parents, the non-Jewish, the gentle parents who saved his life, he was 6 years old. When he came in their house in 1943, she welcomed him, gave him to eat, to drink. And they asked him a question. He was 6 years old. Do you know why are you suffering so much? Why people want to kill the Jews? He said, no, I don't know. Because your parents killed Jesus. Till today, till the last day of his life, he was suffering from this trauma. Why I'm telling this? Because hate speech is not only in public, for the television, for the radio. It's also between people. And with the wrong words, you can create a person, damage him seriously, give him a trauma, or change him from a normal human being into a criminal. What can we do about anti-Semitism? How can we fight it? By the way, during the war, 6 million Jews were killed, but 52 human beings were killed also. We don't speak about that. I think Corona, the COVID virus, will get it under control. But anti-Semitism we won't. It's like a virus who's changing the whole time. In the time of the Crusaders, we were allowed to be killed because we killed the leader, the founder of the Christianity. During the Middle Ages, because of us, there were all kinds of diseases, so we were allowed to be killed. My parents had the wrong race, they were Jewish. They were allowed to be killed during the war. So they survived. And I'm a Zionist. if I'm yes a Zionist or not a Zionist, if I agree or disagree with the politics in Israel. Not interested. I am a Zionist because I'm Jewish. You know, I often speak for a non-Jewish public, and I get the compliment because my Dutch is so well. So I tell them my Dutch is well, I speak fluent Dutch because I'm already 10 generations Dutch. Oh, they react. We thought you were Jewish. In other words, today, the constant attack on the politics of Israel, of course you're allowed to disagree with the politics of Israel, but it makes and creates anti-Semitism, because anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. I recently spoke with one of the, I won't mention any names, especially not because of the friction today between Bulgaria and Holland, a prominent leader of the politics. I told him I'm worried about growing anti-Semitism. And his answer was, it's the Muslims. 98% of anti-Semitism in Holland is the Muslims. My answer was, during the Second World War, there were no Muslims in Holland. And nevertheless, 80% of my family has been killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Rabbi Jacobs. I'd now like to ask Alexander Roska if he'd like to say a few words as well. Alexander.
Esteemed Mr. Geshev, esteemed representative of religious communities in Bulgaria, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, magistrates, representatives of NGOs in Bulgaria, I'd like to thank the organizers, Mr. Geshev, Madam Yotova, who supported us seriously in organizing this event, which is very important. It's important both for our society and for entire Europe. All people who had speeches today, all speakers reconfirmed our will to work together so that society in Bulgaria and in Europe counters actively hate speech, because sooner or later hate speech turns into physical aggression. Very often they turn to us, the Jewish community, asking, why are you so actively supporting people who are not representatives of the Jewish community? Why do we stand with the Istanbul Convention? Why do we stand by the rights of women against domestic violence? Why do we participate in Sofia Pride? Why do we help people with physical and mental disabilities? 6.5 million people died in the Holocaust, but hundreds of thousands of innocent people only because they were different. They died as a result of an ideology which was for men hate, but because there were so many people who didn't do what was necessary to stop this men-hating ideology. They were inactive. And since the moderator mentioned one very respected rabbi, the former rabbi of the UK, Rav Jonathan Sachs, in his books he used to say that whenever there are issues, they turn to the Torah, to the Bible, because together they would find a solution. In one of his books, he explained the genesis of the leadership, what is necessary so that every one of us should do in order to counteract the hatred around us. History and the history of the Bible, which is common for all religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, starts with the story of Adam and Eve. We all know this story very well. And although God explicitly ordered Adam and Eve not to taste the apple of knowledge, they were tempted under the influence of the snake. And they tasted the apple. And then God, seeing what happened, asked Adam, "Why did you do it?" And he switched the blame to Eve. She, in turn, switched the blame to the serpent. And this is something which was accepted by God. And then we have the story of the next generation of Cain and Abel. We know the story about Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel. And when God asked Cain, "Where is your brother?" Cain not only didn't take responsibility, he said, "I'm not my brother's guardian." This was the next huge disappointment in the Bible. And one of the next stories is the story that we all know too well, the story of the Noah's Ark. God, when he saw what was happening on earth, decided it was time, the time has arrived to destroy everything and to start anew. And then there was a righteous person, Noah, and God ordered him to gather 2 representatives of each biological species. Noah was very diligent and fulfilled this order. The deluge destroyed everything with the exception of the representatives in the Noah's Ark. But God wasn't happy with the behavior of Noah either, because Noah in no way tried to defend his neighbors, brothers and sisters. Only Abraham was the first who found the strength and said, when God wanted to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he defended the people there. He wanted to save their lives, and he haggled with God for each and every life. And this was the reason for Abraham to be the father of religions. This was the reason Abraham is the father of nations, both for the Jews and for the Christians and for the Muslims. Because Abraham was the first man in our biblical history who knew how to take responsibility not only for his own deeds, but to defend his neighbors and to do everything possible so that the world would be a better place. It is through this urge that I turn to all of you now. Let's not be inactive witnesses when we see man-hating ideologies around us trying to take away from our future, take away the future of our children. Thank you once again, and good luck with this conference.
Thank you, Chairman Oscar. It's lovely to finally meet you. Last time I was in Sofia, I was with the late and great Dr. Emil Caro, and it was a blessed memory, so it's very nice to make the acquaintance of the Chairman. Thank you for taking the time. Gentlemen, I have a question for both of you. It's a sort of a couple of questions for both of you, which we'll get through hopefully relatively quickly. My first question is to you, Alexander. Walking around or going to synagogue in Bulgaria, do you need protection?
Благодаря за въпроса.
Thank you for this question. Yes, we need protection, and we do have protection. The Bulgarian government, as per an agreement from 2018, actively protects us. It provides security for Jewish buildings all the buildings that we use for kindergarten, school, the synagogue. We believe that also with our own efforts, we will not allow for any acts that will threaten the health or lives or the members of our community.
Chief Rabbi Jacobs, I mean, you a couple of short minutes ago, you said you're 10th generation or longer Dutch. In your lifetime, have you always needed protection, or has it got worse over recent times?
The last 15 years, I did not use any public transport anymore on advice or request from the Dutch National Police. My house is surrounded by 6 police cameras. Cars have been driven into me, literally. And next week, in a few weeks' time, it will be Hanukkah. I light the menorah in public. And I'm telling you the truth, I'm not scared. But I'm not sure if I will survive. That's reality today in Holland.
That's first time I've heard you say that. That's a very sobering assessment. So it seems, based on your last comment and based on the comments of a chairman who was just saying he needs protection here in Bulgaria, that there's a lot more to do to combat anti-Semitism. So if it's not too big a catch-all question, what do you think we can do to fight anti-Semitism? And I'll add as a caveat, your experience, Chief Rabbi Jacobs, of anti-Semitism in the Netherlands is probably nothing like the experience of Mr. Roska's anti-Semitism in Bulgaria. It's a variant, as we were talking about viruses earlier on. So given the complexity of this, I guess respectively in each of your countries, what can we do to fight anti-Semitism? Can I start with you, Chairman, and then come back to Chief Rabbi Jacob?
Thank you for this question. Yes, recently we've been witnessing an alarming increase of hate speech, anti-Semitism, hate speech against the Jewish community and other minorities in the country, which is even used by political leaders and parliamentary represented parties. And that's why it's important to say that any act like this should be prosecuted, including by law. We should not remain indifferent, because it's like a disease, and if you don't treat it on time, it can have a serious effect. And that's why I think that a conference like this, conferences like this are very important. It's good to have this in Sofia, and it's a special place indeed. Sofia is a city of wisdom, tolerance. We all are responsible for our past, but also for our future, for Bulgaria, for Europe, and we should not be indifferent to hate speech, regardless of where it happens.
Chairman, Chief Rabbi Jacobs, your thoughts, please.
Research in Holland, done by Professor Presser, how many people, how many percentage of the Dutch society was fighting active with danger for their own lives against the Nazis? 5%. Those 5%, we don't have to speak with them. You are at the 5%. It's nice you're here, but really, it's a little bit a waste of time. I don't want to insult anybody, but you know that hate speech is a huge danger. 5% collaborated with the Nazis. These are criminals. I'm afraid you can't change them, also not today. But the 90%, the crowd, what direction is the crowd taking? In what direction is it going? We have the obligation, and we need to do everything. Education, education, education in schools in order to reach the 90% what easily can go in the wrong direction if they're getting the wrong information. We have the obligation to make sure that the 90% hears the right things. And therefore, I think your being here at this conference is great, but the goal, the aim is not to be here and listen and hear it, to go away afterwards, go home and work on the 90%. Forgot the 5%, the 90%. What direction are they going? We have the obligation to approach them, to give them education in order that the 90%, the crowd, will go in the right direction.
Gentlemen, thank you. That's going to conclude this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can put your hands together for Chief Rabbi Jakobs and Mr. Alexander Oskar, the chairman of Shalom here in Bulgaria. Thank you so much. We'll move on to our final speaker. Sorry, gentlemen, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. Just before I introduce our final speaker, I was sort of struck by this paradox that, of course, Chief Rabbi Jakobs is right. It's about education, but of course, it's very hard to educate people when you're behind a guarded building or you have a security detail around you all the time. This is a sort of paradox that we have to deal with. But a lot of the hate that's directed against Jewish communities these days comes via social media. And in fact, I can speak from experience. We had a young lady with us a couple of years back who used to come fairly regularly into my office in tears, dealing with some of the hatred and vitriol which we ourselves on our social media pages were subjected to. So with that in mind, it gives me great pleasure to invite up our final speaker of the afternoon. Well, for my particular session, of course, the afternoon continues. Dr. Simeon Groisman, who is from St. Clement Ochrydzki, I hope I pronounced that correctly, at Sophia University, who deals specifically with a question of internet mobs and objects of hatred. So thank you for being with us. The floor is yours, sir.
Уважаеми дами и господа, уважаеми високи гости.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to participate. The title of my presentation is The Religious as a Source and Object of Hatred in the Age of Internet Mobs. I'll just explain the title. I decided to mention religious as a source of hatred and not religion, because religion is a high sphere of spiritual communion with God, and the social tension we speak about with the hatred towards the others is not based on a religious depth. The common man cannot have a religious discussion, but religious feelings sometimes lead to a propensity to argue with the people from other religions. And from this point of view, the different trends in different religions can settle their disputes, but this is not like this among common people. Especially when this is related to a significant social problem, they often find differences between themselves rather than common points. And speaking about the hatred of religious persons to the others, but we can also talk about the cases in which non-religious people hate believers, because largely secular ideologies sometimes look like quasi-religions, like supremacy of human rights or nationalism. They also have an element of religiosity in it. So you should bear this in mind. Then our age is of internet mobs. Without this, we cannot understand hate speech. Internet mob is a Western concept, but it was analyzed in Bulgaria by Geshev and Alexander Malinov in their book. In the past 15 years, social media created a new type of social medium in which everybody can easily become a propagandist. Each person lives in their social bubble. They read the news they like. They read what their friends say and think that everybody thinks like him. And people who think unlike him are aliens and foreigners for him. The scholars of the Enlightenment taught us that in democracy we are a rational part of a political body, and the blood system of this political body is the rational discussion. Unfortunately, the decentralization of the media through social media has turned the idea of rational debate into an illusion, meaning today we cannot say that the everyday debate, even the political one, let alone the one in the social media, consists of rational interactions. Quite the opposite. The internet debates are held to grasp public interest. And when we have a political argument, we have two internet mobs who fight each other by hurling bad language to each other. When these are on religious basis, they are even more dangerous. In the Balkan Peninsula, xenophobia and religious hate go hand in hand. The image of the mob is related to a medieval event. I'm going to mention Berdyaev about the new Middle Ages. In 1994, he wrote how the loss of the rationality in a society, the despair in the rationality of the 19th century led to a rebirth of over-nationalism, which led to a clash between large numbers of people, and we would see endless debates. There were debates between religious and non-religious people. There were debates, however, which could not be concluded. They could not come to an end. And from this point of view, they looked like the thing that Nikolai Berdyaev said. Entire life started to go through under the sign of different religious fights, and there would appear the radical religious beginnings. This looks like the contemporary online context. All alternatives look equal. If there is no consensus, there is lack of objective criteria, and we have a growing anarchy in this discussion. Criminal law tries to prevent this risk factor, criminalizing inequality, crimes and crimes against religion, but criminal law is the last resort for fighting social problems. And if we are expecting the prosecution to be the ultimate guardian, then we are at the finishing line. How is the state repression going? There is a crime, there is a trial, and only afterwards is the sanction. These 4 steps are long enough in time, while our problem is that the critical time is right after the crime has been committed, when there is reaction by the affected believers. There are mutual hurling of insults, and this is why the responsibility should be shared among different social actors, and I'm going to show you how. In terms of the content, hate speech expresses hate, disseminates it further, and ultimately urges for reduction of rights because of discrimination, or even incites violence. it is aimed at people from a different religion, different ethnic origin than the speaker, or different race. In its lightest form, hatred would be an insult, dehumanization. But when you post a comment on social media, it will not be dangerous for the public to be classified as crime, which means that not every hate speech will be a crime sanctioned under the criminal law, but every hate speech is dangerous, and we should consider how the responsibility is distributed. The state penalize the perpetrators. We have crime speech in Article 161, paragraph 1 of the Penal Code, but if something is not sanctioned, it is multiplied, and this is the problem, that our insults become banal and everyday. Who is responsible for fighting against this? Firstly, internet websites should turn attention to such hate speech. They should not turn into incubators of hate speech. The problem is in the moderation of hate speech. There's a problem of privatizing public debate on part of private organizations through IT. And the speaker is turning into a tool for overshouting internet mob, and sometimes people are paying for this access for the benefit of a private company. In traditional media, journalists observe standards. Public figures should be kept at bay by the population. Our problem is that as a society we like to care for our anger and insult people, but the victims of crime, of hate crime, are much more affected. I will give an example from the everyday life. When criminal law is being discussed, one of the political parties, it's a small political parties, allowed itself to propose that the responsibility for inciting hate would not be there for political statements. This will not become a law in Bulgaria, but this is symptomatic for the strategy of populists for dividing layers of society through hate, so that there is no responsibility borne. Even internationally, when we speak about war, people are trying to make it sacred in order to bring more hatred and legitimacy for the illegal war activities. In conclusion, I will turn to the spiritual leaders who have gathered here. The fourth degree of responsibility, I think, is of the religions in a concrete manifestation. I think that now it's high time religions have an internal policy. When a certain preacher says something which is like hate speech, because on the one hand we need to take into account the personal freedom of speech, but there should be a corporate standard if you are a member of a religion. Sometimes some denominations don't have their opinions publicly posted. Sometimes they want their opinion to be immediately posted so that it starts being discussed. And once certain representatives of the denomination immediately post something without consideration, then there is sometimes a problem. Their individual statements are not binding to the denomination, but still there needs to be a standard. Otherwise, there is a risk for the public debate to be filled with hate. Ultimately, a believer is responsible Because even if he publicly disseminates information on an important topic, he is a representative of his or her community in the eyes of the neighbors, of the others. In conclusion, I will give you a quotation without remembering who the author was. One of the Christian leaders said, most people will never read the Bible, but they will meet the believers in their lives anyway. This is true for any religion. We don't know the details of the religion of our neighbors when it is different than ours, but we see them and we know what their religion is, seeing our neighbors, how they behave. So we should always be a model, and this is how we should be considered.
Thank you, Dr. Groisman. We are hideously over time, so we're going to draw things to a close there, but thank you for your very, very important work. It's very important to set things out not only in a feelings way, but also in a logical, structured, academic way. So really, thank you for your work. It helps us understand the lay of the land. So I have just finished my particular part of a moderation. I'm going to hand back to the wonderful organizers. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, dear participants of the conference. Before going to the coffee break, please, let's take a family photo here in front. Before the dinner, there will also be another official picture. Please come to the front.